it's like the 7 hour rule, right? Like everybody hates on mystery for the 7 hour rule. They're like, I pull women in 2 hours and 1 hour and whatever. The 7 hour rule is the idea that we play a solid game and we make the woman really want sex before we engage in sex, as opposed to let's see how fast I can escalate this, right? I've seen mystery pull chicks in less than 7 hours, right? So it's not a rule, it's a general guideline for building a strong skill set. And sometimes I think right now, in particular in the pickup scene, the focus is on being super direct, making the woman decide on the spot whether she wants to hear your whole album without even giving her a sample of the album. It's very direct. It's all about fast escalation, and I think playing solid game is a much more sustainable style. Generally, if I'm going to generalize,
The
I see what
question is where and when do you want to screen? So there's like two extremes, right? One extreme is you screen very aggressively right off the bat, and then you screen out a lot of girls. Some of them might be girls who've been interested, but the girls that whose numbers you do get are going to be very down. The other extreme is that you save all the screening for the end, right? And then the problem with that is you're going to be finding, like Lucario says, a lot of girls are like, "Oh, I was just looking for a friend." I personally find that the best approach is is somewhere in the middle where you screen progressively throughout the interaction with small compliance jumps. So, for example, that could be opening her, relatively indirect, and then flirting with her a little bit, saying that you guys can go on a date now that you're just grabbing her number, and then maybe flirting with her over text and then inviting her straight to your place. So you're progressively screening throughout the process. I think that's the best balance between
absolutely
wasting
true.
time and also maximizing the amount of girls you get. But yeah, there's different styles. I will say one thing though about Lucario's style is that I think it works for him because he's very confident. But I think that if you go that direct, you better be 100% confident, because if you're like 70, 80% confident, you will probably get annihilated because the girl will be like, "Excuse me, what do you say?" And if she can just sense that weakness, and if she senses that in you, that style is going to get you just rejected, right? So if you're going to go super direct, I think you have to be very confident in that and not have any shame around what you're doing.
Hey,
Mm.
I want to add to this that, and I mentioned this before about Lucario working out in New York City, and me spending my time there with that almost very similar, exact same approach, more or less. Being cosmopolitan, being like understanding different cultures, who you're speaking with, understanding different cities and the ways that their cultures are. Um, I mean, without that, you're going to get yourself in trouble just taking my advice and going up and be like, damn, girl, you got a dump truck. Like, that's not going to be a good. And, Ross already said, in certain places where there's a different culture, you're going to get called out immediately. And so in my hometown where I am now, 10,000 people, farm town, if I did that for a few weekends in a row, I would get run out of town. You know what I mean? And for good reason, right? Because that's just is a small town. Everyone knows each other. I don't want someone talking to my sister like that. So now in New York City, it's, I mean, if you guys haven't been there, it's what you'd imagine. It's so fast paced. Um, and there's just so many beautiful women. So it's very easy. And, they are getting catcalled and they are getting approached that way. So it's like they are a little bit aware of it. And so when you have an approach like, hey, how you doing? They know what that means. So then the next line being, yeah, you got a dump truck. I'm trying to see what you're about. Now we're talking. And so I think I think the first thing that anyone needs to do, and this goes back to what Michael Lee was saying about empathy and curiosity, is to become sort of this global citizen, this worldly person. And you don't, it definitely helps to travel and to see different places. But there's so many other avenues to sort of develop that spirit.
Ryan, I have a
So
perfect solution for you to adjust for your small town. Just say, do you have, looks like you have a nice farm truck, and that's going to be a lot more socially appropriate, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
even better.
Yeah.
What a difference between New York and Los Angeles. Like one side
Yeah.
can't handle it, the other side sees it every 5 minutes.
Truth be
Mhm.
Well,
told,
Some
I've
topic
I've
is
stayed in both. I lived in LA for a while. I grew up right next to New York. I used to go there. I wouldn't say there's a big difference actually between LA and New York in terms of like game. I do think there's a big difference between game in terms of like a small town and a city, but I didn't really find any big difference there.
on the
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's
topic of
sometimes
definitely.
screening.
Go ahead,
On
Ross.
the topic of screening, it begs the question, screening for what? Now, I've been doing hypnosis for 30 years. I know that word freaks people out, so you're entitled to have your impressions about what you mean about it. I'm screening first and foremost for focus. My learning, my lesson, my teaching is that focus is the currency of any kind of influence, whether it's persuasion, sales, seduction, any of it. I'm screening to see, do I have her focus? Is she exclusively focused on me? To what degree is she focused? Are her pupils dilating? Is her breathing pattern shifting? Because when I see that, I know that she's entrained, ENTRAINED. She's entrained with me and she's beyond rapport. And she can be very quickly moved from rapport into compliance. I don't mean compliance with cruelty. You can do compliance with compassion, which speaks tangentially to this whole 7-hour thing. If any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. If you only have a certain kind of magic, it probably does take 7 hours. You can, in a way that's not skipping over rapport, not skipping getting to know the person, not skipping comfort. If you know the magic of communication like this, you genuinely can do it with a genuine connection and real comfort in a matter of 2 hours. And
On average, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I know that seems impossible. I don't blame you for thinking it's impossible. I respect Erik and his system. Every system has my system has limitations. Speed seduction is very hard to learn. There's a steep learning curve. It's not for everyone. You have to be willing to learn a new language, but it brings things that other people would think are impossible and that cannot be done.
But let me just clarify real quick. So you believe that the average woman will have sex with a guy in 2 hours or less, the majority of
I
them.
would say within 2 to 3 hours, if I can answer, it's an intelligent question. It deserves a thorough answer. I believe within 2 to 3 hours, it can be done. That doesn't mean you have to have sex in that period of time. In fact, I don't recommend it because when the penis goes in, the crazy comes out. So I recommend you slow down the sale.
I assure you, I know that it can be done in 2 to 3 hours. But what I'm saying is, do you believe that the average everyday woman will have sex with a guy
I not only
in 2 to
believe
3
it,
hours?
I not only believe it, I know it to be the case.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ross. I would say 2 hours, maybe even like an hour and a half, depends on what city you're in, but 2, 3 hours average, not just to fuck a girl, but to actually build a sufficient connection that the experience is pleasurable for her and that she wants to see you again. I think that 2 hours average is just about right for the average girl. This only works if you have a good game, though. If you're like the average dude, then it'll probably take you longer because it takes you more time to escalate, more time to build investment. But for a guy with a good game, yeah, absolutely 2 hours I think is fine. I think sometimes
I am admitting the average guy, I don't know what you mean by average, but if you're not highly intelligent or at least beyond average intelligence, my system is shit. It's bullshit and it will not work. You have to be bright to grasp the principles of subconscious communication and to understand how and why they work and not just repeat my words and my language patterns. If you're not smart and if you're not willing to have the discipline to go up a steep learning curve, my work is bullshit and you should avoid it.
I'm not even talking about your system necessarily. When I say average guy, I mean like dude who doesn't know pickup, a guy who just lives his life. Maybe he slept with a few girls in the past, has a 9 to 5 job. That's what I mean when I say average guy.
Hey, what's
Ross, I definitely
hour
believe.
thing? I'm confused.
Go ahead, Lucario.
Oh, no, I was asking what's the 7 hour thing? What is that?
So this can I comment to Ross real quick and then I'm gonna go to you.
Yeah.
So I just want to say really quick. First of all, Ross, I do believe that your stuff is extremely high level intelligence material. I've written down more stuff from you than anybody else on this call so far. Focus is the currency of any kind of influence. It's money. But the only question that I have for you guys is it the style of game that you're running that's attracting a certain type of woman that's willing to have sex within 2 to 3 hours on average? Or is that on average, the majority of women will sleep with a guy in 2 to 3 hours? I'm not saying the majority of women wouldn't do it occasionally, but do the majority of women sleep with guys in 2 to 3 hours as their default? And
I
then,
didn't say they
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
said you can get them to the place
Yeah.
where they're ready and willing to. I didn't say they necessarily will. And furthermore, we're using very loosely defined terms like average man, average woman. It's so loosely defined, it begins to lose all of its meaning. So let me drill down, get granular, and define what I mean. For me, I'm looking for someone who's reasonably intelligent, a woman, and therefore reasonably suggestible. By suggestible, I don't mean I put her to sleep and she obeys me. I mean that her unconscious mind is able to process ideas. It triggers her imagination, flows the feeling in her body, imagery in her mind, internal sound, and that depends largely on the skill level of the operator, as any hypnotic communication would. And I think about, in my experience and the experience of countless thousands of my students, remember, I've been doing this since 1988, actually, about 30 to 40% of the women do respond this way. That's not even the majority, but when they do, it's far less effort and far less work. But everyone's system works for them. I'm going to state it very clearly. Eric von Markovic is a genius and an original. I thoroughly respect him. I believe what he teaches works within the system that he teaches. I'm simply saying, if you're stuck in your own system, just like I can get stuck in my own system, my system is incomplete. It's subject to error. Everyone here, no matter how much they believe in what they do, and no matter how much results they produce for themselves and other people, are working within a system that is blind to its own errors and where it's incomplete, myself included. So that's all I want to say. Any model being presented here is just a model. I say this, I'm retired from teaching seminars now, but every seminar I always started by saying, nothing I'm teaching is true with a capital T. There's exceptions, it's incomplete, it's riddled with error, most likely, and it's only a model. It's a model that's worked for me. And if you use it as I teach it, it will tend to get you results it will get the results for you that it predicts far more often than not. I actually need to go. I'm tired and I have a coaching call I need to do with a client. I'm really happy to have had this honor. This is a level of intelligent exchange that the community deserves to hear. I really want to connect with you. I'm sorry, young man, to have you on my podcast. Ice, please arrange it. Eric, give my sincere regards and respects to Mystery.
will do.
The guy's a genius, and I fully acknowledge him as that. I really enjoyed our discussion we had that Ice hosted. I hope to see him in person sometime. I know he has some kind of family down here in San Diego, so my treat, my honor to take him to dinner when he shows up.
I'll let
Ross,
him
what
know
about
he's
that
going to be in
intelligent
San Diego
exchange we
soon.
had on with Grace? Don't you think that tops that?
Say again?
What about that really intelligent exchange you had with Grace Thorpe? Don't you think that tops that?
Grace Thorpe is a pinhead. All right, guys, but she's
Yeah, buddy.
such a big train wreck. You have to look at her. You can't turn away. I've got to.
Thanks.
Like he's
Alrighty.
up.
Guess he
I
disappeared.
was just gonna can I add to that real quick?
Yep.
So me and Ross's systems are quite different, actually very different. But I do agree with his conclusion that 2 3 hours, even 2 hours, I would say, would be average. That a guy with good game can seduce most girls. I will agree that's not going to be so. Most girls are not sleeping with the average guy in 2 3 hours, right? But you don't really want to be like the average guy. The average guy is making a whole series of mistakes. The average guy is probably slightly overweight. The average guy probably doesn't make that much money. So you don't really want to be like the average guy. But if you have a good game, I think, yeah, 2 hours is reasonable for even for relationship worthy girls. Like I'm looking at I'm on my fifth relationship right now. I've had 5 long-term relationships. If I look back at every single one of those relationships, I would say that altogether, probably took me 2 or 3 hours to sleep with a girl, and then I wound up dating her for a while. With my current girlfriend, it was probably, if you combine everything, probably around 3 hours. So yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts.
I appreciate that you guys, and I understand like there's like a 7 hour, I guess this is probably written, right? And so like I totally understand there's reasons behind all these notions of time, but like it seems to me to be deleterious and problematic to really extend that beyond like a very tight room of of a more deep intellectual conversation around this, because I'm afraid that, if you think of the idea of a speed run, it seems like, that's what guys are trying to get out. How much time, what's the least amount of time that I can spend to get laid? And I sympathize with that. I totally understand. I've been there and I've approached it that way, but
Have you ever heard of cryptocurrency? What's the quickest time I can become a millionaire?
yeah.
It's always that thing. We have Uber Eats, we have Amazon, we have all this stuff that is on demand because of our on-demand mindset, thanks to
I think
technology and how
What
we
I
use
mean to
it.
say
But
is, Ice, what I mean to say though is more of, it's almost like an autistic like lens to view it in. It's like we're looking at it in the lens of because I have many clients too, as I'm sure you all do, and they're saying to me things like, "Is it true that X coach can get me laid in 1 hour or in so many minutes, or do you believe that he did this in whoever it is, right?" And so it's like, and it's, of course I believe it in that sense, of course, because I've gotten laid on approaching a girl. I've stepped out of my apartment and I've said, "Hey, you want to come to my apartment?" and gotten laid. Like crazy stuff has happened. And so, but like that is a terrible, and again, maybe this is what the 7 hours is really trying to get at. It's more of just like I'm not sure. So maybe Eric here can give me more detail, but it seems to me it would make more sense about, this is how long it takes for people to really get to know each other, right? Or at least begin to get to know each other even.
Well, it's you have to take it within context, right? Like Eric came up with it, and the fact that, let's say you meet someone for an hour, you at a club, whatever, you talk to them for an hour, maybe you go on a date with them. That's about 2 hours. You go on another date with them, 5 hours. Go on a third date with them, 7 hours. This is kind of like a counterbalance to the guys, the simps that would take girls out for like 5, 6, 7 dates. So if you add that all up, now you're talking about like 12 hours. So it's just like a counterbalance to that. Like, it's been quantified, so it feels cold, right? But when you actually apply it to how like most normal guys do it, it's like 3 dates. Like most girls are going to know if there's enough sexual chemistry to sleep with you. And 3 dates, that's 2 hours each. 1 hour, like when you approach them, that's roughly 7 hours.
Okay,
that
so
what
the 7 hours is like from meeting to actual sex. Like it's saying that that's the average amount of time.
Yeah, the time you have spent with that person, assuming you're not doing like rapid fire, like screening game like that you do. This is the typical, I meet the girl and then I go on a couple of dates with her, roughly corresponds to that 7 hours.
So Lucario, let me give you a quick primer because I want to let you talk, man. You've been doing a good job just listening, but I want to hear what you have to say, man. The 7 hour rule, popularized by Erik von Markovik, not Erik Carlberg, Erik von Markovik, mystery, came up with the 7 hour rule that when he runs the M3 model, which is a way to compartmentalize the game, he's found that when he runs his style of game, it takes an average of 7 hours from meet to beginning the sexual relationship. It can be as soon as 4 hours, or it can be as long as 10 hours on average, with the middle being 7 hours. So that's the 7 hour rule.
Oh yeah. So bear in mind, like a lot of coaches out there, especially no matter what their level is, there is the incentive all the time to, like, everyone pays attention to their story where they pulled in 2 hours. Like I could say, for example, I didn't pull a goal in 30 minutes. She pulled me in 30 minutes. And we all got these kinds of crazy experiences. Like I agree with what Alex was saying. He was saying, yeah, like two hours is not impossible, even if you're a little bit intermediate or a little bit more than a little bit intermediate at game. 2, 3, 4 hours can happen, provided that you're doing game consistently pretty easily. Still, if you're early into the whole game thing, but still, it's let's not really like nitpick on the number of hours it takes and all that
I
stuff.
think, I
But
think,
any final comments on?
yeah, I was
Okay,
gonna,
okay, you go ahead first.
I was gonna say this real quick. 'Cause I kind of I kind of see what they're saying, because like I think what JT Tran was saying is that, like, yeah, if the guy meets the girl, they go on a few dates, that's going to equal to about the amount of time that'll probably get to that point. The only issue I would have with it is that based on how you come at the girl is going to sort of dictate her perspective of how she sees you also. So this is why the reason why I even go up to girls like and make it sexual is because I don't want them to think I'm trying to like have a relationship with them now. Like I'm like, we're just going to hook up. And then maybe later on down the line, if I like you, then we could keep it going and whatever. And so what happens is that if you're going out on a date and, you know, 3-4 dates, then you have sex, in her mind, she sees you as maybe boyfriend material. And it's so sort of what I'm saying is you got to be careful of how you're coming at a woman, because then her perception of how she thinks the situation is going to cause some type of entitlement that she's going to have based on the perception she has of you. Now, if you want a girl as your girlfriend, then hey, that makes sense to go down that route. But if you're like, hey, I just want to hook up, but you're going on 3 or 4 dates, and then you're just like, I want to get to the sex, and then you get to the sex, and then she's expecting to keep dating you, you're just trying to fuck her, that's going to cause drama. You see what I'm saying? So I guess it all depends on how you want to go and which direction you want to really go into it. You see what I'm saying?
But the question, I guess, too, is do you believe that the majority of women will have sex in 2 to 3 hour experience? I've found that there are many women that will sleep with a guy within 2 to 3 hours. There are many women that will do that more than once in their life. But I believe that the majority of women don't like sleeping with guys within 2 hours. I think the majority of them prefer a little bit more of a drawn out love story, a little bit more romance without leading them on, as you said. So I believe that what you guys that are big on the fast escalation, I believe you get very good at it because you develop a keen eye for certain types of women. You set frames early on, you sexually prime, you set sexual frames early, you sexualize. Even the sub communication is probably very sexual. So you may be on average pulling women in 2 to 3 hours, but you may be discarding the failures as anomalous when in fact you've just highly curated your style of game. That's why I'm a little bit more of a proponent of solid game. I don't necessarily believe the 7-hour rule is it's exactly 7 hours, but the idea behind it is for guys to slow things down, draw it out a little bit more.
Yeah. So to respond to that real quick. So I would say that a good majority of women will sleep with guys quickly, even before 2 hours. It could be an hour, it could be half an hour. Majority of women will do that if they find men who are worth doing it with. So like if a woman finds 5 guys in a row that she's that highly sexually attracted to, she will sleep with them in an hour if the circumstances cause that to happen. So what I'm saying is that a good majority of women won't sleep with guys that quickly because a good majority of women are not highly sexually attracted to most guys. You see what I'm saying? It's almost like if a woman says, hey, how many guys are interested in long-term relationships? Most women are like, oh, all these guys just want to fuck. They don't want a long-term relationship. But if a man found a woman who was worth it, he'd get into a long-term relationship with her. So it's like, it's not necessarily the thing. It's that, is this particular person in front of me worth doing that particular activity? So you see what I'm saying?
And to your point
let's
too,
draw this to an end here. Although I will say,
guys, can I just make one last point? Or do you really want to move on?
No, I'm gonna say no.
Next.
I'm gonna be mean. Erik did tell me maybe a week ago or something. Maybe there is an opportunity to have a debate for guys who are into solid game, like Erik is, and guys who are into fast game, let's say. If you're interested in that, just send me a message after and we can arrange that. But let's move on to shutting this conversation down.